And from industry officials to economists to state lawmakers, KALB's investigative team is continuing to dig beneath the surface of carbon capture in Cenla. Robert LaPearl was KALB Investigates, has more on how officials view the new technology as well as how it stands to benefit Louisiana.
Deep in the woods of Vernon Parish, just outside of the town of Simpson, sits what some would describe as an ordinary pipe. But this isn't your normal run-of-the-mill pipe. Spanning down several thousands of feet, this small project promises big results for Louisiana.
Louisiana itself has some of the best geology.
This project is owned by Capture Point, a self-described carbon management service company based out of Texas, with their eyes dead set on the Pelican State. With them, they plan to bring the CCS process, which in their words starts with capturing it, then transporting it with the ultimate end goal of sequestering it beneath the ground. And Cenla is already beginning to see whispers of their plans. Set squarely in between Vernon and Rapides Parish, Capture Point COO Chris Robertson claims their central Louisiana carbon storage hub could bring a massive boost to the region's industries.
There's several industries that are currently moving on CO2 sequestration projects. Those include ammonia, natural gas processing, power generation, and others, but there's quite a few. And also there's industry like direct air capture.
But the storage hub isn't where their prospects end. They're also investing in the DAC industry under the name of Project Cypress, the result of a partnership with a Swedish company known as Climeworks. And they've already made plans to spend over $100 million for just phase 1 of that project.
What we're seeing right now in Louisiana is we are seeing unprecedented levels of investment from companies all over the world.
Dr. Greg Upton with LSU's Center for Energy Studies describes these projects as the result of a larger global trend towards decarbonization.
Liquid fuels, chemicals, plastics, fertilizers. These are very energy-intensive products to produce, but these are also emissions-intensive products that there's a lot of emissions associated with them, in particular greenhouse gas emissions, which is the concern that countries around the world are really focusing on right now.
And that focus equates to more money for companies. Dr. Upton says companies, most notably in Europe, are willing to pay a premium for lower emission products.
And so what you're really seeing is these companies are trying to balance, yeah, I want cost competitive, but I also want to be competitive on these emissions fronts. And so it's this industrial decarbonization that's been a really, really big focus in Louisiana, because over half of our emissions actually are industrial emissions. And again, the customers of these products we're producing are telling us they want these lower emissions.
And he says that is what Louisiana stands to gain from CCS. Companies that make emissions-heavy products can inject their carbon emissions underground, therefore allowing them to cash in on those price premiums. And experts with the Louisiana Economic Development Authority argue that more companies may flock to Louisiana if offered opportunities to achieve that lower emissions status, with businesses like Capture Point looking to set themselves up as a one-stop shop for companies to get in on the CCS rush.
And if we can get that done right, we set the railroad, if you will, the interstate highway that brings more projects and more industry to these areas.
And money is already pouring into the state to cash in. Several major announcements in Louisiana is underscored by some degree with their plans to utilize this technology. And even Meta, formerly known as Facebook, have partnered with Entergy to power their $10 billion data center, a project state leaders like Governor Landry touts as a massive win for Louisiana. Will also utilize CCS, following announcements that funding will be given towards injection projects near Lake Charles. But
it will poison the vegetation, it will poison the water, so therefore it will poison my people.
These kinds of projects aren't perfect. With them come the potential threat of asphyxiation or the contamination of water sources if a pipeline or well leaks, and even the claiming of a person's property rights without the owner's consent. And those risks worry some residents in Louisiana. State Tribal Chief Len Wiggins is one of those residents.
If it kills the vegetation, it's getting into my people's livelihood. The Indians like to grow their food. I represent my tribe, my people. So with their concerns, and this is one of their concerns, they're very concerned about this.
And the risks and skepticism associated towards the growing industry doesn't necessarily remain at just the local level. State lawmakers are also casting doubt on the projects.
I really feel like we're going off of all the studies of the business world and not our own studies and justifications. If you're paying millions of dollars to a certain entity to do a study on something, they may leave out the bad stuff and really concentrate on the good stuff.
And Schermerhorn's doubts aren't isolated. If Capture Point were to have an info seminar where they explain the projects, would you trust them?
No, sir.
But that doubt extends well beyond just studies on risks, with some state lawmakers opting to believe the industry itself is wasted effort.
It's not necessary. It won't do any good. There is an ongoing debate as to whether or not the expulsion of carbon into the atmosphere causes man-made climate change. I do not believe it. There are plenty of scientists who do not believe that, and I do not believe that we should surrender our personal property rights and potentially damage our environment over something that is not settled.
But between the promises for economic prosperity and the looming threat to residents, the question remains. Do you believe that's worth it?
No, sir, I don't.
Are these benefits in your eyes worth adopting some of these projects?
No.
I would never agree to doing carbon capture to begin with because, as I say, it is a fraud. So I'm not going to say that I can be convinced to undertake more fraud that we're already doing.
I would say that CCS is necessary for a lot of industry going forward, and I would say that getting this project in Vernon Parish off on the right foot, where everyone wins, is the stepping stone to the future.
And companies will continue, especially emissions-intensive and energy-intensive companies that we have here in Louisiana, are gonna continue to take this into account in terms of where they put investment.
And that was Robert LaPearl reporting. You can find more information on carbon capture over on our website.